Tonight, I invite you to rest. Let this slow, forgotten story carry you gently into sleep. The road leading into the town was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from isolation, but the gentle, drowsy calm of a place that has simply stopped trying to be remembered. A thin morning fog stretched across both sides of the highway, turning the faded wooden sign at the town's edge into a soft silhouette. If anyone bothered to walk close enough, they'd see a strange detail. The name of the town had been painted over, again. The new name, Stillwater Junction, looked fresh, still too bright, still too white. The paint was barely dry. A historian named Caleb Warren stepped out of his old station wagon, boots landing softly on the gravel as he approached the sign. He tilted his head, studying it with the tired curiosity of a man who has spent too many years reading forgotten stories from forgotten shelves. He whispered to himself, "Another name. Fourth time this decade, they say." A calm breeze blew, nudging the edges of the painted board. Under the white letters, Caleb noticed something else. Older names scratched beneath the surface. Not one name, but several, layered like sleepy memories slowly fading. Pine Ford, River Mouth, Prospect Crossing, and one so faded it looked like a shadow of a word. Elders Ford. Caleb let out a long breath. Why would a town change its name this many times? No one had given him a clear answer. Not the local archives, not the county office, not the 3 historians who warned him that the town doesn't like being remembered. Caleb brushed dust off the sign, though he wasn't sure why. Then, with a soft sigh that matched the quiet tone of the morning, he stepped back into his car and drove forward. The town greeted him slowly. Small wooden houses sat along the road like worn-out storytellers, their peeling paint the color of old paper. The porches were wide, the windows still fogged from the cool dawn, and the chimneys gave off thin ribbons of smoke that curled lazily into the air. Most towns had a rhythm, a heartbeat of cars, footsteps, doors opening and closing. But Stillwater Junction had none of that. It was as if the entire place was breathing softly, half awake, half asleep, living through its own slow-motion version of time. Caleb parked near the tiny general store. The wooden sign above it swung. The old man nodded. "The librarian. She remembers the most, or she tries to." Caleb thanked him and stepped outside. The fog had thickened now. The rooftops looked like floating islands, and the wooden sidewalks creaked softly under Caleb's boots. He walked toward the library, a small stone building with ivy trailing down the walls, and a clock above the door that had stopped at 7:14 at least 20 years ago. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and quiet mornings. Shelves curved in gentle arcs, their books arranged with no clear logic, an odd mixture of American history, faded town maps, and blank journals waiting for stories no one bothered to record. At a long wooden table sat a woman in her 70s, glasses perched low on her nose, flipping through a book with slow, deliberate movements. She looked up. "You must be Caleb," she said softly.
Her voice was warm, but tired, like someone who had tried to remember too many things for too long. He nodded. "I heard you might know why the town keeps changing its name." She closed the book gently, as if not to disturb the silence around her. She whispered, "I know the stories, but I don't know the reason. No one does. We only know that whenever we try to write the truth down, it disappears." Caleb's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Disappears? How?" She pushed the open book toward him. The page was blank, completely blank, but the edges were smudged with ink, as if writing had once been there, and slowly, quietly, faded away. Caleb looked up at her. She whispered, "Here, history doesn't stay." The library felt colder now, not frightening, just peacefully strange, like a place that had forgotten how to hold on to its own past. Caleb sat down across from her, ready to ask more, but she lifted one finger calmly, as if telling him to slow down. She said, "There is one story we do remember. The first name ever given to this town, the name it had before the others washed away." Caleb leaned forward. She inhaled slowly, and just as she opened her mouth to speak, the library lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. She swallowed. "The town was once called—" The librarian's lips parted, her eyes unfocused in a distant, sleepy recollection. Caleb leaned forward, barely breathing, waiting for the name she claimed the town once held, the original name, the quiet one, the first memory. But before she spoke, she glanced toward a far corner of the library where dust drifted like slow snowfall. "It's strange," she whispered. "Whenever someone tries to say it aloud, the lights flicker, just like that." Caleb gave a soft smile. "That could just be old wiring." She shook her head gently. "No. It has happened for decades, every time." A long, calming silence followed, the kind that stretches softly like a warm blanket settling over a tired mind. Then she finally said it. "Elder's Ford. That was the first name." The room felt still in the way forgotten places feel still. Not frozen, just drifting in their own quiet time. Caleb repeated the name softly to himself. Elder's Ford. And the lights did nothing. No flicker, no hum. Just silent acceptance. The librarian exhaled with relief. "That is unusual." Caleb wrote nothing down. He had already noticed how the written word behaved here. Instead, he let the name rest in his memory. "Why did they change it?" She folded her hands, fingers trembling as if they carried the weight of too many unspoken stories. "No one knows. The earliest town settlers wrote journals, but every journal from that period," she tacked the blank book gently, "looks like this." Caleb looked around the small library, the dust, the faded maps, the old carpet that muffled every step like a soft lullaby for footsteps. "It's as if the town erases its own past," he murmured. The librarian nodded slowly. "Or," she hesitated, "the past erases itself." Caleb decided he needed to see the oldest structure in town. "Where's the first building?" he asked. The librarian lifted a hand, pointing toward the east window where the morning fog was beginning to lighten. "The settlement cabin," she said. "It's by the river. Or where the river used to be." Caleb blinked. "Used to be?" She nodded calmly. "The river moved, or dried. We're not sure. It's different in every map we keep." Caleb felt a strange mix of curiosity and the soft, slow wonder that whispered stories bring. He thanked her and stepped outside. The walk toward the settlement cabin was quiet. The fog was thinning now, revealing the outlines of houses with roofs that sagged gently, as if they too were tired from holding old memories. Caleb passed the abandoned blacksmith's shop, its rusty tools resting on a wooden table that looked as though no one had touched it in half a century. Further down the path, he crossed a grassy field where an old sign leaned sideways. It read, "Site of the first bridge, 1832. Except the sign had been crossed out, and written beneath it in faint pencil was maybe 1834 or 1840. Caleb chuckled quietly. Even the signs were unsure. The cabin appeared through the last veil of fog. It was small, made of darkened logs and stone. Caleb approached slowly, as if stepping into a memory that wasn't quite stable. He touched the door, and it creaked open with a tired sigh. Inside, the air smelled of dry earth and old pine. Light seeped in through the cracks in the wood, cutting faint lines across the floor, like forgotten stories trying to return. There was a table, a chair, a stone fireplace. Everything simple, quiet, and ordinary, except for the journal lying on the table. It was old, bound in cracked leather, edges curled like dried leaves. Caleb lifted it carefully and opened to the first page. Blank. He flipped to the second. Blank. He tried the third. Ink stains. But no words. Just scattered marks, as though someone had written an entire story, and the memory of that story had slowly dissolved. Caleb ran a finger over the faint remains of the ink, and for a moment he thought he felt something, a slight warmth, as if the page remembered that words had once lived there. He whispered into the empty cabin, "Why does this place erase itself?" The wind answered gently, slipping through the gaps in the wood with a soft hush that sounded almost like, "Leave it, leave it." But Caleb was stubborn. He closed the journal and held it to his chest. "There must be someone in this town who still remembers Elder Ford," he said softly. And in that moment, he noticed something carved on the inside of the cabin door. A name. The letters were weathered, but still readable. E. Marlin, 1829. Caleb frowned. Marlin. The shopkeeper said the first families didn't leave names. He touched the carving again, slowly, gently, and felt splinters beneath his fingertips. This was real, a memory the town hadn't erased. He stepped outside, carefully closing the door behind him so the cabin could keep its fragile stories. As he began walking back, he saw someone, a figure standing near the foggy field, tall, still, facing him. For a moment, he thought it was just a tree or fence post hidden in the haze. But then it moved, a slow, deliberate shift of a shoulder, turning toward him. Caleb paused, the peaceful quiet of the morning surrounding him like a soft blanket that suddenly felt too thin. The figure was a man, wearing old-fashioned clothes, a vest, rolled sleeves, boots covered in mud. He didn't walk toward Caleb. He simply stood there, as though waiting. Caleb raised a hand in greeting. "Hello. Are you from the town?" The man tilted his head slightly. Then he whispered, a soft, almost airy voice carried on the wind. "You shouldn't write anything down." Caleb felt his breath catch. "Why not?" he asked. The man blinked slowly, and then said, "Because Elder Ford never wanted a historian." The fog thickened around him, and the man vanished. Not dramatically, not suddenly, just faded, like an unfinished story. Caleb stood frozen for a moment, before exhaling a long, calming breath. He whispered to himself, "I need to talk to the oldest resident here." And with the same steady determination, he began walking back toward town. Behind him, the fog drifted quietly, as if carrying away the memory of the man he had seen. With a tiny window covered in dust, and a door that hung slightly crooked. Caleb walked back toward the center of town, the fog thinning into long silver strands that drifted behind him like soft curtains. The air was cool, quiet, and still heavy with the strange calm that Elder's Ford, or whatever the town wished to be called, seemed to carry. He reached the little diner first. A tiny bell above the door gave a muted chime as he stepped inside. The sound echoed softly, a lonely but peaceful note. An elderly man sat in the corner booth, stirring a cup of coffee that had probably grown cold long before Caleb arrived. His eyes were pale gray, like old river stones washed smooth by time. Caleb approached him gently. "Sir, may I ask you something about the town?" The man looked up with a slow smile. "Only if you don't mind a long, quiet answer." Caleb chuckled softly. "Long and quiet is exactly what I'm hoping for." The man nodded once, patted the seat across from him, and waited until Caleb sat down. "Do you know the town's first name?" Caleb asked. The old man's fingers paused on his coffee cup. After a peaceful silence, he replied in a voice soft enough to blend with the hum of the diner lights. "I do. And I also know why the town keeps forgetting it." Caleb leaned forward, letting the stillness settle around them. The man continued. "Back in 1829, before the river moved and before the first bridge disappeared, This place was just a small clearing near the trees. People didn't name things so quickly back then. They waited to see what a place became. He took a slow breath. The settlers chose the name Elder's Ford because an old man, Elias Marlin, built a crossing over the water. Just a wooden plank and rope, but for travelers it meant safety. Caleb felt a soft chill across his arms. Marlin. I saw that name carved in the cabin. The old man nodded. He lived there, and when he died, peacefully, in his sleep, the townsfolk said the river paused for a moment, stopped its flow, as if paying respect. A serene silence followed, like the story itself needed to breathe. After that, the old man continued, odd things began to happen. Maps changed, letters faded, books turned blank. The town forgot its own history, piece by piece. Caleb asked quietly, "Why?" The man smiled the gentlest, saddest smile. Because Elder's Ford was never meant to be remembered too sharply. Some places prefer soft edges, like dreams. Caleb's voice was barely above a whisper. How does a whole town choose to forget itself? The man tapped lightly on his chest. It doesn't happen here, he said. It happens in the heart. People started telling themselves that the name didn't matter, that the dates didn't matter, that the stories were too quiet to keep. Another long pause. And so, the town simply agreed. Caleb closed his eyes for a moment, letting the explanation settle like dust drifting onto a forgotten shelf. When he opened them again, the old man was looking at him with a thoughtful expression. "You're not from here," he said softly, "and you still remember the old name. That's rare." Caleb nodded. "I want to help the town remember." The old man chuckled gently. "Son, maybe it doesn't want to." Caleb stepped outside. The sky had turned a muted blue, the kind that signals a calm afternoon, where even the wind prefers to rest. He walked toward the center of town, to the old notice board, where signs fluttered weakly in the breeze. One particular note caught his eye. Town meeting, name review, Friday evening. Caleb blinked. Even now, the town was preparing to rename itself again. He reached out and touched the paper lightly. It felt warm, strangely warm, as if someone had just finished pinning it there. A voice behind him spoke. "They'll pick a new name today." Caleb turned to see the librarian. Her hands were folded in front of her, her expression soft and thoughtful. "I thought," Caleb hesitated, "I thought the town forgot names, not chose them." She smiled. "A little of both, really. We forget the old ones so we can choose the new ones without guilt." "Do you ever get tired of it?" Caleb asked. The librarian took a slow breath, watching a thin swirl of wind drift across the square. "Sometimes I think the town just wants a name that finally feels like home." Later, that evening, they gathered. Just a few people. The librarian, the shopkeeper, the diner cook, the old man, and Caleb. They stood in a gentle circle, under the soft golden glow of a single street lamp. The old man stepped forward. "Tonight," he said, "we choose what the town wishes to be called for now, not forever, just for this moment." Everyone closed their eyes. The silence deepened, not heavy, not uncomfortable, just a quiet so full that it felt like time itself was listening. Then, with a calm breath, the librarian spoke. "Still water rest." The others nodded slowly, the name settling in the air like a feather drifting onto a pillow. Caleb exhaled softly. "It's beautiful." The old man smiled. "It will last a few years, maybe less, but for now, it's enough." Before he left, the old man placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "You were looking for a history to write, but perhaps this place isn't a story you write down." He looked toward the fog-shrouded fields. "It's a story you carry quietly, just long enough to help someone else sleep." Caleb felt something inside himself loosen, a calm acceptance. Maybe some histories weren't meant to be preserved as facts, but as gentle moments, soft voices, and names whispered to the night. He turned back one last time and whispered the town's new name, Stillwater Rest. The wind carried it away, not erasing it, just softening it, until it blended into the quiet. And somewhere out in the fields, Caleb thought he heard a peaceful whisper reply, "Thank you." This story was written exclusively for Whispered Dreams. What name would you give this town?